Hi guys, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate you guys taking some time off of your day and joining us. I know it's a minute after one. Thought we'd give folks a minute or two to log in. There's still more folks joining us as we're speaking. So in just a minute, we'll go ahead and kick this off. Want to appreciate everybody's time and busy schedules. I can imagine you guys are all super busy, and I appreciate your time. I think we have a lot of good info today. As we sort of gather here today, I want to say that, as you guys know, for those of you who've logged into our webinars in the past or seen us at events, we really like to keep the sessions discussional, interactive, and beneficial to the audience, right? So there is a drop down on the right-hand side where you can put in your questions, and I'll try to monitor those as we go along. So feel free as topics come to mind or issues come to mind, or there's just something that you'd like us to present on. Feel free to drop those into the question box, and I'll be monitoring that, because to us, this is for our audience, right? It's for our audience to sort of understand what we're talking about, have an opportunity to ask us questions, and obviously, and I think I speak for all of us here today, both for John Cook and Rick Grams as well, we're always available afterwards if you have any questions and want to shoot emails or want to dive a little deeper into anything we've talked about today, always available after the sessions. So it's about 2 after, so well, now it's 3 after. I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off. So first of all, most of you, know GCP, GovContractPros. We've been around for a period of 5 years. We're very delighted to have our sister company, and we've grown and have since organized under a holding organization with 4 sister companies altogether. And we have an opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But today we have SGA. I'll let John sort of give a brief background on SGA and what they do, but they're an incredible group of professionals in the BD space, from pipeline development to proposal preparation to tracking and developing the pipeline, creating strategies around teaming and mentor protege. And so we'll talk a little bit about all of that today, right? And I want to make sure, like I said, that the discussion goes where our audience likes it to go, because John, Rick, and I promise, can talk for hours about things that we like to talk about in this space, and we've lived and breathed this space. But we want to make it beneficial to you guys. So, John and Rick, thank you for joining today. Today is really about sort of the pipeline, right? And when I think about pipeline development, I go back to my days when I first entered federal contracting, and this is going to age me, back in the 80s. And it was like, oh, you got those yellow. You guys are probably maybe even too young to remember these. It came to you every day. It was a yellow, like really thin paper document, which is basically what FedBizOps became. And you'd go skimming through that and you'd be like, oh, I have an opportunity here. And that was like what FedBizOps became, and ultimately what SAM is. And what I always tell clients is that if that's what you're doing, you're way behind sort of the 8 ball. You're sort of always playing catch up. And you're not really looking at this with a very strategic view of creating a pipeline and building out that pipeline and capturing opportunities. So I know we want to talk about that. John, I'll turn it over to you to sort of let the participants know a little bit about SGA, and then maybe we can start diving into the presentation. And as we go through, I know I have a whole bunch of questions on the different topics you've raised in your presentation, but I'm sure we'll have questions from the audience as well.
Great. Thank you, John. Thanks for the intro. And thanks for the opportunity here today to work with GCP to present on this important topic. So a little bit about SGA. You guys can see the slides here. You can see the bullets. You can see the services. Some of you on the call we've connected over the past, maybe even some recently from the 8A conference that you stopped by our booth. So we appreciate everyone for attending this conference or this webinar today. And I wanted to explain briefly how Strategic Growth Advisors fits into the overall structure. So John is the group CEO for Service Equity Partners, which is our holding company. And then we have 4 separate sister companies. And these sister companies, some of our clients that we work with, they engage us for all of these services. Other clients engage us for a la carte services from each of the sister companies, or one or 1 or 2. It really depends on what those type of a la carte services those clients need. Now, the key to this is clients are all at various stages of their life cycle. And so because of that, it depends on the services that they need from us. Some of the companies that we work with, that we grow from the ground up, they need all of these services because we're bringing in the entire corporate G&A suite of services. Others may already have a finance department and HR structure in place. Maybe they've already outsourced to a PEO, but they really need some business development because they're just in the stage of preparing to launch for their 8A. So they'll sign up with GCP to launch their 8A, and then they pull us in when the time's right to help with the overall growth and development of their business. So mergers and acquisition, that's another piece of the business that comes into play, of course, when working with some of our clients and helping advise them on potential acquisition targets. So next slide talks a little bit about, we'll get into the details now of building your pipeline. And as John mentioned, it is so important to take that strategic look. And everyone will be at a different stage of the life cycle, the different mindset of how they are developing this pipeline to prepare them for success. For example, one company that is just launching their business has 0 past performances. They're going to be leaning on teaming partners to get things going until they start to establish a presence within the federal government space so that they can go after some of these prime contracts that are set aside. But regardless of whatever stage you're in of that life cycle, this is really the entire process that we advise our clients through from the initial assessment. When we get engaged, we need to understand from that initial assessment with that clients, who's buying your products, what products are you selling, and what is that forward outlook from a forecasting perspective with the agencies that you want to focus on, and what's the backward looking forecast, or not forecast, but spend? What's that look like? Who's been buying some of those products? And John, I see, looks like you've got a question, sir.
Yeah, no, so that's a really good point. So look, so I sort of alluded to this as we were getting started, right? I mean, we come across clients, and like I said, I even did this myself when I was in federal contracting years and years ago. And it's a very reactive approach to, oh, something came out on SAM, right? But if you're doing that, your potential competitors are either the incumbents or have relationships in the agency or have the already established the proper past performance and relationships and teaming partnerships to, and probably have even put that the proposal together. And so I think what you talked to about data analysis is really important. And when you talk about data analysis, a lot of folks just get very apprehensive, right? Because that's not their forte potential, right? There might be an IT services company and maybe that's their forte, but a lot of times people just get apprehensive. But what I try to do, and you and Rick can potentially shed light on this, what I always say is, who's buying what I'm selling? How are they buying it? Are they using one-off contracts? Are they using, the government-wide acquisition vehicles? Are they setting it aside? So, hey, are they 8A friendly? Are they women-owned small business friendly? And then once you figure that out, you're like, okay, these are my top 10. And by the way, there's also the plurality of opportunities, right? If Wright-Patterson Air Force Base has $1 billion contract, but it's $1 billion contract, they're probably not going to give it to me. So you got to look for plurality of opportunities. So it seems daunting, but that analysis really helps you focus your limited BD resources on your top 5 and 10. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that approach, because you pointed to, John, historical data, and Rick, you're a pro at this, right? Looking at the historical data to come up with this analysis. And then you sort of marry that with intelligence on the ground, forecast, relationship partners, those types of things. But maybe we can talk a little through that to sort of share our experience and our best practices with the group today.
Yeah, let me jump in there really quick. So you're correct. Not a lot of people like to sit down and put their face into the data and look at it from 10 different angles. But what's the important part of doing that is recognizing that you're essentially, your business is essentially a ship, and you want that ship to be going in the right direction. If you want to get to the Bahamas, you're not going to be driving it. Not going to be taking your ship north. You want to know that you're going south, right? So, the data is about making sure that you're using information for not final decision making, but for putting yourself in the right direction of the market, aligning yourself with the right teaming players, the same companies that complement your services, and then also making sure that the activity that's out there in the market that you're targeting is actually live activity with budget budget information behind it. No sense in chasing opportunity that's not funded, right? So those are critical factors. Now, most people that are decision makers in a company, particularly in the small business arenas like we're in, they don't have time to be sitting there and focusing on the data. So, in our approach and the way we advise our clients, it's very methodical. We provide access to, to our system, SGAInsights, which lets a person click through really quickly and efficiently with filters on different data points from their perspective. Unlike other systems, we don't try to tell people how to think, because everybody has an independent value in their thinking process that they bring to the market also. Our tool allows that value to be capitalized on for themselves. So I just to add to what you were saying there, John Shoraka.
Yeah, thank you. And John Cook, I mean, so look, I always say, once you pick your top 5 or top 10, you got to have a three-pronged approach: acquisitions, programs, and the small business office. A lot of people forget the small business office, right? So you got to have a three-pronged approach. But I would almost argue that you're going to say, well, that's part of it, but who's your competitors? Who's your teaming partners? How do you get the right past performance? Is there a mentor-protege joint venture that's going to help you strategically set up better for this? Can you shed a little bit of light either on sort of what I just said about, you found your top 5 and where do you do now? Or also the whole part about, competitors, partners, teaming partners, mentor-protege, joint venture, past performance, all those great things that ultimately, if you don't put together appropriately, isn't going to create a successful pipeline.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So along the lines of what Rick was talking about, in addition to doing the analysis and the research and identifying these top 5 or 10 agencies, once you identify these top 5 or 10 agencies and you figure out where you're going to focus your time and energy to sell whatever those products may be, equally is spending the time to research those partners and the companies that are in those spaces. And a lot of this, and the reason that we built this SGAInsights, and we'll play a little video for you guys here in a minute, and then of course everyone's going to get free access. We'll send that out, and Rick will work with everyone that attended this conference to kind of get you guys spun up and go through some training here the next couple of weeks. But one of the reasons we developed that is, frankly, we didn't develop it to sell initially. We developed it to help us be able to do our job more efficiently for the clients that engage us for business development, support services, and the other things that we offer. So along those lines of what you've asked, though, John, is it gets very complicated and very difficult to analyze mass amounts of data quickly to be able to get that information. We want to know who the top 5 partners are within each of those agencies or departments in any of the social economic statuses too. Large business, small business, medium business, 8As, tribal 8As, woman-owned, hub zone. Because as you start to look at that type of stuff, if you've got a unique solution or some service offering, you're going to want to know who you need to call, who you need to work with. We've got a client right now that has been an incumbent on a contract, and this contract, there's been multiple sole source contract awards. I think 3 with one of the tribes, back to back to back. And now the government has decided that they're in a position, and the client that we have has done a phenomenal job for this client, and they've gotten them to a certain point that now they feel like they can have maybe 2 or 3 awardees on a new competitive contract that's out there. And so that being said, there were some reasons why this company that was in there as a sole source prime awardee needed to partner with someone. And what happened was people reached out. They were doing their homework. They were researching. They were analyzing, and they reached out to this client. And now a teaming agreement has been formed. And so now there's a situation where that client, that because they were doing their research and they were doing, or this other company doing the research and their analysis, now they're teamed up with this other company. That stuff happens all the time. But if you're not doing your research and you're not analyzing, you're not looking at those partners, and that's the biggest thing too, I encourage people is, don't try to go with these things all alone, especially depending on where you are in a business development or a business life cycle. But frankly, find those partners, because now you don't know the relationships that exist with those clients that are incumbents, that are embedded within those agencies that have developed those phenomenal relationships. And so even though you're not getting 100% of the work, even though maybe it's 49, even though it's maybe 40, whatever it may be, it's still a nice piece of work, and it helps you integrate within those agencies where you likely aren't today. And even if you are in there today, I encourage people, still be partner friendly, because, now you're subcontracting out a portion of the work to another company. When you get to that position, as you grow in the life cycle, well, guess what? Now that company that you're working with, assuming that they're a good partner, they're going to be in another agency. They're going to remember that. And so these are these types of strategies that we talk about when we're talking about building the overall strategy, from strategic sole sourcing, partnerships, small to small joint ventures, mentor proteges, competitive bids. It's not a 1 or 2 or nothing. It's really all 5, and you've got to work all 5 of those strategies. And oh, by the way, you need to get your company cleared too, because that's a really big thing. Because you can work these 5 strategies that you see here on this slide, but if you're not getting your company cleared, you're missing out on tremendous amounts of revenue. And so that's always a very key element, but that's one piece that a lot of people aren't real clear on how to get done. And, it's complicated, but it's not as complicated as it seems once you really kind of understand how to navigate that. So, John, you got another question there, sir?
No, so I do have some questions for you based on sort of what you just unpacked, because and again, feel free, guys, just to drop questions into the question box on your right hand side. You can drop it down and send questions. And by the way, we did get a question. We will try and send these presentations out to the folks that are participating today. And as John mentioned, and I didn't say it off the top of the presentation, the SGAInsights is available. Correct me if I'm wrong, John Cook and Rick Grams, is going to be made available to everybody that's participating today. And Rick will set up some times that he can walk folks through the tool and how to use it. But just unpacking some of the things you said, because, it's hard for a small business to think about payroll, think about pipeline, think about partnerships, think about a mentor-protege relationship. You talk about, hey, it's not one or the other, you should be thinking about all. And then I also talked about, hey, once you find your opportunity, it's not just dealing with the acquisition folks. You got to get in front of the program folks. You got to understand where the small business specialist is and what their pain points are, and are they meeting their 8A goal or the hub zone goal. And so all of that becomes a lot of work, right? And as small businesses, we sometimes don't have the resources to sort of be very strategic about all of this work, right? But maybe we can talk a little bit about this slide that you have here. I mean, look, so one of the challenges for newer firms or even more sophisticated firms is that as they do their targeted approach, and let's say they identify, I don't know, I always use Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or Aberdeen or whatever it might be, right? As they start to identify that, then there's a strategy, right? Based on what you just laid out here, there's a strategy of, okay, well, I identified this. Yes, I can do what Shoraka talks about, getting in front of those people. But how do I understand who's the strong companies that are there today? How do I understand which one of these options is the best option for me in reaching out to this? Why is small to small or mentor protege important? And you can talk a little bit about, you inherit the past performance of both members, and that's really key in pursuing some of these opportunities. But maybe you can talk a little bit about, this seems daunting because you just said go, it's not one or the other, pursue all of them. But maybe you can talk a little bit about, your new company, what do you do? You're a little bit more advanced company, what do you do? And how do you approach it?
Sure. Yeah. So when I look at these 5 pillars and I look at strategic sole sourcing, partners, small to small, just kind of walk through it. So strategic sole sourcing, that ties into the direct relationships with whether it be contracting or program shops. One of the things I say a lot is, everyone has their own approach to various strategies, and they all work. Some of them work maybe a little quicker than the others, but a lot of times some of these strategies that people execute will get you there. What I mean by that is one group may go directly to contracting because they feel most comfortable there. Another group goes directly to program. For me personally, I always recommend program because they're the customer. They have money, mission, requirement, and they are the customer for the contract shop, and they're the ones that need the education on how this works a lot of times with the strategic sole sourcing. Contracts, they don't typically need to understand how to get that done, and they don't typically have the bandwidth to go train up all the program shops. So if you work with them and you help the program shops understand how to navigate that process to get that market research package to contracting, and provide them with all of the required documentation, the bars, et cetera, it's usually a pretty simple process to get that process through. And that strategic sole sourcing could come by way of your direct relationship or based on some of your network or some of your research, a partner that you may have that is in there. That maybe is a subcontractor on another contract, or maybe they've had success within that agency. The agency really likes them. Maybe they're wrapped underneath a large business, and the customer says, "Hey, we really see who's doing all the work. It's this small company, and we really like, company A, B, and C. Hey, go find an 8A or go find a tribal 8A, et cetera." So, and then if you have those types of relationships, and you're helping educate your partner network as well as looking to try to educate the direct end user network that you have, whether it be program or contracts, then that's how those roads a lot of times intersect on that strategic sole sourcing. And I say 6 to 10 months, but typically the time frame for a sole source contract, once you make contact with contracting office, once you've gotten everything through from program shop and you've gotten them educated, and depending on how quick they need to move, and and the caveat to all this, they've got to have a money mission requirement. When that stuff happens, I see these things and a lot of times take place typically within 30 days from beginning to end once contracting is engaged.
John Cook, I think the important part here is, and you've done this, Rick, you've done this for a long time. I was in government and was responsible for these programs. So we know this program inside and out. But I think the challenge here oftentimes is, and a lot of small businesses don't appreciate it as much because they expect that the program office, or sometimes even the contracting officer, is fully aware and trained up on the process. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of times you have to sort of educate what you just said. You have to educate the program office. You have to educate the KO about, oh, well, you got to do an offer letter. It's got to go to the district office. This is what package should include. This is what, government cost estimate, those things. So there is yeah, unfortunately, and look, having been in government, I say unfortunately because that really should be well understood across federal government, and to a certain extent, the business opportunity specialist or the small business specialist of the agency should be taking the lead here. But that's why you pull in that the third pillar. But it does take a lot of education. If it's not a contracting shop or a program shop that you've worked with in the past and who's familiar with the sole source authority.
Yes,
Oh,
Rick, comment, sir.
uh, everything you said, John Shoraka, is absolutely true and correct. You know, we as business people, we should be prepared when we're walking into those offices to be able to guide the contracting officer or a program office on how this works. I mean, it's what we do for a living, right? And you know, while they're there to execute it, you know, they have a lot on their plate. Like you said, you've worked in the federal government. There's just a lot of things that get put on people's plates that they don't have time to be the expert in every one of those plates. So, you know, we advise people to go in there ready to provide that assistance, you know, maybe have some templates ready to go as far as what a letter looks like, you know, to be able to hand it off to them or send it to them on an email, and carry it forward that way. And, oh, by the way, while you're doing that, you're actually building one of the critical things that we all need in business, and that's the relationship, right? So now you're starting to build a relationship. And, oh, by the way, while you're learning about each other in that relationship, you also learn that they have other opportunities that have not yet been published, right? And that's where things start to come to life. That's where, when you're with the right teaming partner, that, you know, if you're a young company, you're with the right teaming partner that has, you know, several years of senior to you of past performance experience, everything you start identifying how with that contracting officer or the program office, where you can fit in to make their world easier. Right?
Yep.
So it's all kind of part of a path, you know, where we try to define a roadmap. It's just like everything else in the world. That roadmap is just a map, and as you're going through it, you uncover new things that may not have been thought about, but as business people, we have to be opportunistic and grab it.
Yep. And John Cook, I do want to, there's a question that I'm going to throw your way in a second, but I do want to, on this slide, have you talk a little bit about the small to small and the mentor protege, because that's really an important tool as well, especially, yes. And a lot of folks think it's only for like brand new 8As or you know, really nascent companies, small businesses, or women-owned service disabled, but it's really an effective tool to make you super competitive, right? Because your calls flow to the joint venture, so both members, and so it's a really effective tool. I want you to talk a little bit about that in a sec. And Rick, totally appreciate what you just said about that relationship building, right? But it's super nuanced, right? As a contractor, I wouldn't walk into the contracting officer's shop and say, you don't know what the heck you're doing. Here is how things are done. Let me tell you, right? But it's very nuanced, right? And there's that struggle because you know what you know, and you know you want to impart and share that and guide them and nudge them in the right direction. But it's very nuanced to build that trust and that relationship over a period of time. And you're absolutely right. It's the building of the relationship that ultimately you do a good job, then they keep coming back to you, right? They're like, oh, wow, you did a great job. We can do an 8A sole source. And the other thing that I'll say is you can do women-owned sole source. It's more restricted. 8A is obviously the easiest way to sole source, but we've had clients that educate and nudge a contracting officer in the direction of how do you do a woman-owned sole source. And there are steps of getting that done, and it's a little bit more restricted and not as easily accomplished as a 8A sole source, but you can do sole source in the other socio categories. But yes, very nuanced and definitely relationship building. John Cook, maybe if you can, and Rick, if you can talk about, you know, the importance of at least considering, I shouldn't even say at least considering, building in the joint venture and the mentor protege program as one of your pillars for success.
Sure. So I've got a slide up here that talks a little bit about the mentor protege and the small to small JVs. One of the things that we encourage our clients all the time is take these into consideration. But if you're going to take this into consideration, you've got to spend the time on the front end to map things out, to put a strategy together. Because what happens a lot of times, we've seen this in the past, where a company decides, hey, we're going to put this small to small JV in place, and we've got all these ideas, and wouldn't it be great if, but they don't put anything on paper. And then 6 to 8 to 9 months into the partnership, nothing's happened. That's still there. They've got a website, maybe they got some marketing slick, nothing's happening. And a lot of that's because they didn't put the work in on the front end. And I tell people this a lot of times. I said, listen, you're forming a new company, even though it's an unpopulated company. Just like putting in the work with your current company, it takes a lot of work to make the business flourish. And it's the same. Now you've got two companies joining together, which complicates things a little bit, but it's a very good tool if it's thought out and it's mapped out so that there's very clear expectations of what you're trying to accomplish. And you really want to do that on the front end so that once the small to small joint venture is approved, you've got your plan and basically your business plan, and you're going to work. So we advise the client on that type of process. And what we also tell a lot of our small companies that are our clients, maybe they're forming one with a mentor, whether it be a mentor protege or another small to small, and it's a little bit of a bigger business, is, let us be the bad guys. Let us advise you, let us work with you, let us poke holes in the strategy paper to make sure that we get everything out that needs to be out, because there's no point in forming these things if it's not going to work, because you're just wasting time. Everyone's wasting time. And so, to your point, John, is what's the importance of this, right? Why do you do this? The big thing is because you inherit the past performances of the other company, of both companies for that matter. But a lot of times, it typically both companies have to bring something to the table. And typically, what the small businesses bring is they're bringing their social economic status. The big companies, or the bigger companies, typically bringing past performance, client entry points, and they need the small business status to be able to go after some of those sole source type contracts. It also inherits the corporate certification. So maybe there's some ISO, et cetera. So as you start to put this strategy together and you're analyzing everything that we're talking about here, you're forward looking, you've identified these agencies. As you go through that process, you may identify through that process, you say, you know what, man, there's some great opportunities, and there's within these agencies that we've identified, but we just can't get there because these aren't, we know there's going to be competitive opportunities, and so we really need to align with someone, but there's a variety of these, and we need to identify who is that right partner. You start to look within your network of who some of those companies may be that can fulfill some of the gaps that you have, and maybe a small to small JVs required, or mentor protege versus just a standard teaming agreement. A lot of times in these, what we're seeing in the competitive opportunities is they'll clearly state the prime must have. And so in those cases, that's the reason that you want to form these joint ventures, because the prime will have when you put that JV in place. Otherwise, you've got the team agreement, the prime sub. And as John mentioned earlier, you've got companies in there that are working the angles like we all should do to strategically set ourselves up for success. And they may have verbiage in there that doesn't necessarily evaluate as favorably a prime sub relationship versus a prime with those past performances. So I always tell people, you've got to be looking out 12 to 18 months when you're putting that pipeline together strategically for all of these things, from the not only from your opportunities that you're looking to pursue, but how are you going to pursue these? How are you going to put these partnerships together? I saw a question. I know, John, you're going to ask some, but I'll mention this as it's relevant. Your top secret clearance. That's one of the things that people think a lot. They say, well, I always hear this, heard a million times. What's the cart before the horse? I can't bid this because I don't have the clearance. It says I have to have the clearance, but I can't get a clearance until I get a contract that requires clearance, right? There's ways to get those things done. And some of those ways to get those things done strategically is you go to a partner. You go to, I had a call this week with one of the companies that we met from the 8A conference, and I explained this. I said, you go to your partners that have a clearance, that have a prime contract, that are cleared, that you have a good relationship with, and you ask them to issue you a subcontract, one body on a contract. It's going to take, number one, you've got to get cleared as an owner of the company. That's going to take 8 to 10 months. So there's a nice runway for that. Second piece is, once you as an individual become cleared and your KMPs, key management personnel, become cleared, Then you have to get what's called the TSFCL sponsorship letter. Well, once you get that TSFCL sponsorship letter, that also takes another 8 to 10 months. Right there, you're talking 2 years out before you can pursue a top secret.
So John Cook, right there, that sponsorship letter comes from your potential partner, be it someone that gives you that one small subcontractor, be it from a mentor that gives you a small subcontract in order to sponsor you to get your TS facilities clearance.
Right, and you've got to get real strategic on that stuff, right? Because maybe it's one body. And maybe we worked with a client not long ago, and what we did on that contract, it happened to have infrastructure, layer one systems. And so what this partner did for another one of our clients is they issued them a TSFCL sponsorship letter. And what the scope was for that project was a sub-K for them to come in and perform a Tiger test team. They come in behind all the infrastructure cabling as it was tested, and they do spot check to the subcontractor that was already in there to make sure, and maybe the PO is 15 or 20K, but the bottom line is it had to be done by someone. Either it could be done by the prime contractor, or in this case, they helped out another small business because of some relationships that were in place. And now that company has been cleared to the top secret level. So you've really got to think through a lot of these things as you're working to kind of set your company up for success. So John, hopefully that helps. Rick,
no, it does. There's
okay.
Yep, definitely. There's a couple of clarifications I just wanted to throw out there, obviously, just for awareness for the group. As a protege, you can only have 2 mentors in your entire lifetime, right? So you want to be very strategic, do your homework, and make sure that they're bringing something to the table that benefits you in the long run. And it is a 3 + 3 years, so that mentor-protege relationship can go on for 6 years. And you can create JV number 1 under there, JV number 2, JV number 3, et cetera. And your mentor can be small or other than small. And sometimes folks are like, hey, I want, Lockheed Martin, AECOM, Boeing. And what we always say is that, number one, they're very selective because they only get 3 in the, out of all their subsidiaries, they only get 3 proteges, but they can roll them in and out. So they're selective, and if you don't have a relationship, they're not going to choose you as your protege. But even more important, they haven't been through what you've been through, right? They haven't grown an 8A, graduated it, gone after sole source opportunities, all those things that really need to be imparted onto you in this relationship. So number one, do your homework, see where the gaps are, what the mentor brings to the table. If one of them is going to be your, wish list Lockheed Martin, the other one should be probably someone that's graduated and been in your shoes before. And then the other thing that I'd say is why the mentor appreciates this is because after they create the MPA and do the joint venture, as John has presented here, the venture partner, meaning not the 51% owner, the 49% owner, can actually do up to 60% of the work. So before this, your mentor that was other than small couldn't do any set-aside work. Because of this, they create the joint venture, they can do 60% of that set-aside work. And you can create, joint venture number 1, run through that, create joint venture number 2, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just some clarifications on the program. And then small to small, you can do, basically an unlimited number of small to small JVs. The one thing I'd caution is if a significant portion of your revenues are being generated by joint ventures with the same firm over and over again, at some point SBA is going to say, well, wait a second, you guys are affiliated and combine your revenue. So you want to be cautious about that. When you have the MPA in place, you're exempted from any finding of affiliation, so you can do joint venture number 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. So just some words of caution on that. And appreciate, John Cook, you answering the question about the facilities clearance. The one thing that I think is important, and Rick, you pointed to this about educating the program office, et cetera. Someone asked about BOSs and requirements letters. And so look, I was responsible for these programs for a long time at the SBA. BOSs are overwhelmed, for better or for worse, right? If you're in the DC district office, your BOS, the DC district office has 1,300 8As. The next highest, which is also incredibly high, is 400 in Baltimore, and I think 425 in Richmond. You go out to Oklahoma, You go out to Idaho, Iowa, those district offices have 40, maybe. So are they going to send out requirements letters? Chances are that's part of their job descriptions. Chances are no, they're not. What really is the impetus on, number one, get to know your BOS. Number two, talk to them about requirements letters and search letters and stuff like that they could send to the local buying activities. But it really almost begins from the other side, as Rick was saying. The program, and John was saying, the program office understanding the process, wanting to engage with you, and then the offer and acceptance letter gets sent to the BOS, and the BOS reviews it and confirms that it is all there, and then signs off, because the BOS needs to sign off on the offer and acceptance to accept that requirement into the 8A program on behalf of the 8A participant. So I just wanted to throw that out there. John Cook, I see you brought up the strategic partnerships slide. You want to go through that while I look through the questions?
Sure, John. So thanks. Before I dive into that, one of the questions that I will address here, someone asked about going to the contracting office and talking about the socioeconomic status and what the current administration is pushing down. And you're right. And you know, a lot of times you may go in and yes, that's exactly right. You said, hey, they don't care. Well, I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that it's all about your strategy and how you go about this. Because if a client, if a program shop has a requirement for whatever it may be, and back to what I was talking about earlier, maybe there's a small business in there or a large business, doesn't really matter. But that program shop is trying to gain access to that company, whoever this may be. It's about putting that partnership together so that then when it goes over to contracting is able to check those boxes. And now they have a full package that says the program shop told me who they wanted. They've got a company that mitigates all the risk, which is this company they've worked with for a long time. And they partnered up with this 8A or a tribe or whatever the socioeconomic status is. And then we're going to either go through and sole source this, assuming it's one of those categories, or now we're going to put this out as a woman-owned set-aside or SDVOSB or whatever it may be. But there's really a lot more, because if you show up and you just go into contract and say, hey, listen, I do all these things and I have this status, and here's a letter from the president that said that you're really concerned with this, they're going to say that's what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, you know, and it may come across as they don't care. It's not that they don't care, it's that there's all these other things going in the background that's helping them achieve their numbers, because there's a lot more strategy that's taking place. And so they do really care about meeting their numbers, but they may give the appearance that they're not going to hand you a sole source contract, because if that's all you're coming in with, then there's 10 other people in line that are working a serious strategy behind the scenes. So I think I wanted to try to address that. John, anything to comment before I talk on the slide?
Yeah, no, the only thing that I'd say is that so that's why I always think about sort of the three-pronged approach, right? There's a couple of things. One is that when the administration put out, hey, there's going to be a 15% goal for 8A small disadvantage, they also looked to keep senior leadership accountable to those goals. So SESs with a program budget now have on an annual review basis, hey, are you meeting your goals? So that takes some time to work its way into the system and for folks to understand. The other part of it is it's got to be a sort of a three-pronged approach. You can't just either in isolation go to the program office and say, hey, you know, this is, didn't you hear about this goal and you should set this aside? It should be really looking at, is this appropriate for being set aside, right? What's the strategy? What's the acquisition strategy? Is the small business specialist at the buying activity aware of the acquisition strategy on this? And have you worked with them to potentially get it set aside? And then the last thing I'd say, and I know this all sounds really complicated, every buying activity is overseen by a procurement center representative. So when I was at the SBA, we had a staff of folks that oversee every buying activity, and they enforce the rule of two, meaning that if there's a requirement and there's more than two or more small businesses that can perform the product or the service, then it shall be set aside. It has to be set aside. So was that market research done? Was the PCR aware of it? Did they sign off on it not getting set aside? Where is the acquisition strategy? So involving yourself in that is not easy, but that's why you focus on your top 5 buying activities, right? Getting to know the small business specialist, getting to know the program office and the contracting office, getting to know who covers this, because if you go to the SBA and do a search for PCR, they have who's assigned to which buying activity. And are they involved? Is that PCR involved in an acquisition strategy? So it can sound overwhelming, but once you develop those relationships, it is also incredibly beneficial and can be beneficial as a source of revenue, because it might take some time to start generating traction, but once you have traction and you have the relationships and you're actually doing good work, that's when you see the benefits of developing this sort of broad strategy on pipeline development. John Cook, I'm sorry.
Great.
Are you going to go over this slide? Oh, and by the way, John Cook, we're running up against 1:47 already. I want to appreciate everybody's time. I want to run the slide after you talk about this. I want to run the video on SGAInsights, and then maybe just a quick description of the system from Rick before everything ends today, because I want to appreciate everybody's time.
Perfect. And one of the questions came in just to clarify for the team. Yes, these slides will be sent out. And so I know that maybe some of you are on laptops. Maybe this slide here, there's a couple things that are hard to read, but the high level is this, and then we'll play the video and let Rick speak for a few minutes and then wrap this up. But it's really about this strategy here is what we work with our small business clients that have socioeconomic statuses, and this kind of maps back to that partnership approach. There's a lot of companies that if you talk to them, they say, yes, we do federal contracting. And then you start to ask, what vehicles do they have? What are their socioeconomic statuses, et cetera? They may not have much, but they're currently a subcontractor. It doesn't mean that they're not good at what they do. It means that they don't have some of the advantages that some of the other companies bring to the table. And so those are really good targets because they built a really good company and a really good infrastructure, but they lack some of the things that the socioeconomic status companies bring to the table. That's really what this describes, because I've seen this a million times where a small business goes in, they do all the work, they write the scope, they come up with the independent government contract estimate, they do all these things. They have this relationship with the program shop, but they have no execution strategy for the acquisition. And then the program shop hands it to contracting, and they don't have a detailed market research strategy. Once contracting gets it, they go to best-in-class contract vehicles, or they go out to SAM or whatever it may be, and then all of a sudden that company's scrambling. And so, I would just encourage a small business with those socioeconomic statuses, look within your network, identify companies that maybe fall within that category, that profile, and execute the strategy that's down here on the second half of the slide, which is partner up with them, bring a strategy to the table that helps them get those sole source activities, educate the program shop, et cetera. I know we're kind of running out of time, so I'm cutting that short. Let me go ahead and play this video for the team, and we'll talk about this, and we'll let Rick talk about it. It's a 1 minute, I think it's a 1.5 minute video. So here we go, and then Rick will hand it to you for a minute.
So John Cook, do you or Rick want to go over a little bit about the, I know you had a slide or two on the system. You want to go over that and see if there's any questions? We're down to 9 minutes, just keeping time.
So
Yes.
the
So are you able to see here? Perfect. There you go. Go ahead, Rick.
Yep, it's back
there
up.
we go. Nice. So SGAInsights, as John mentioned earlier, we built this for our internal purposes, but it became evident that because of how functional it was and how efficient it was, to share it with our clients and this audience, to provide access and let you also play with it. It's a great tool. You can go in there and through filtering techniques of your choice, you get to control all the filters. We can identify, sole source contracts, source of SOTs, everything that's in the SAM database, industry days, special announcements, pre-solicitations, and we can also identify in any agency the top 25 most active contracting offices. All of this information is publicly available, and what we've done is we've brought it into one system, one portal, so that it's right there with quick and easy access, and all the data complements each other. Literally at this point of using it, I am sitting in front of it with a cup of coffee, and before that coffee is over, I'm done with the system for that morning. I'll go back into it in the afternoon because we have it updated 3 times a day. And it's again a leading indicator system. It's helping you point your business in the right direction for the market, where you're identifying opportunities, but also potential teaming partners. You want to see the list of the top companies working, the top 8 companies working in a particular agency. That's one way you identify which teaming partners you would want to target for other opportunities because they have a track record already. Little techniques like that is what the data is all about. But we're not trying to force the data on people. We're trying to show a picture of what direction people can be going with their companies to increase their revenue opportunities and grow.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. So there's a quick question. I'm going to kind of breeze ahead here. There was a question that was asked. We don't really have much time to go into this slide, but you guys will receive this. But the high level, this is that process, and this kind of ties back into one of the earlier slides in the beginning, collateral development. We've talked about pipeline, we've talked about market research, but as we start to work, or you start to work on your collateral development, if you find that you're constantly educating the program shop on whatever it may be, if you're an 8A or if you're a tribal 8A, or a SDVOSB, whatever socioeconomic status, you really need to kind of have that process listed on your marketing slick and on your website. Make it quick and easy. This is just an example of a 90 IQ that took 90 plus days to complete. And then one of the questions that came in as we start to wrap this up, and then John, I'll hand it to you to close us out, is you ask about, someone asked, what will we be receiving for free? So we will be providing access to SGAInsights to everyone on this call. And my assumption is Rick will probably set up, because there's so many attendees, he'll probably set up over the course of a few days an overview training, providing everyone access to the tool set on a few days. And so that will be at no cost to the attendees from today. And really, we're in business, provide a service, all of us that you saw on the initial org chart. And so we're here to help and work with the clients to guide them, advise them, whether it be a la carte or full retainer suite of services. And we have various packages for each of the operating units that we offer within Strategic Growth Advisors, very similar to SGA or SGS, as well as GCP. There is a fee for our services, but this right here is kind of the business model in a nutshell, and it's what we talk to people about. If you can read on the bottom, it talks about the traditional model is hiring some of these resources, and what we encourage small businesses is, consider the outsourced, because You know, a lot of times people ask us too on SGA, probably it's a different response on the GCP, because GCP is helping with, you know, your compliance, your certifications and things like that. SGA is more about business development growth. They say, well, you know, can you guarantee success if we engage you for the BD? Can we guarantee success, you know, for these various operating units that we offer, marketing, proposal? And the answer is, for business development, you know, nothing is an absolute. Everyone on this call is engaged in growing their business, and we know that it's not easy. It's not just drop a sole source deal in. That's why there's so much strategy that goes in place. And we always like to tell people is, you know, first of all, we can't guarantee success for anything, but what we can tell you is that we have tremendous amount of success stories. And as you reach out to us, we're happy to link you up with our clients that have been extremely successful. And we can point to a lot of these successful partnerships that we've established. But that's going to be from the business development side. From the proposal side, of course, you know, we have a very large proposal team that supports a wide variety of clients in various industries, same on the marketing, et cetera. But this is the business model that we help our small businesses understand. Go out and hire one or two resources, or look to potentially outsource a variety of these services. Let me hand it to John Shoraka to close us out, and we appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah, so I know, thank you. First of all, thank you, John Cook and Rick Grams, for joining us. The first time and this has been years and years and years, but the first time I met John was working through actually a mentor protege, or actually one of the earlier times. And what he said today really resonated at that time as well. Folks create these relationships, prime sub, mentor protege, joint venture, with the assumption that, hey, I'll create it and they will come. And unless you're really strategic about it and treat it, and something you said, John Cook, really resonates, is you got to treat it as its own business, right? It's got to have its own presence, its own slicks, its own web page. You got to have a marketing team for it. You got to build a pipeline for it. You got to have a quals for it. And unless you take the time to do that and grow it like you would grow your own business, you can't just set them up and expect things to happen. Now, an MPA also has a lot of other benefits, because benefits are supposed to flow from mentor to protege, and you want to make sure that happens. But ultimately, one of the largest benefits is the joint venture and the source of revenues, development, and growth that comes out of those joint venture relationships. So having said all that, we're right on time. Rick, how do folks, because I've gotten a couple of questions about this, we talk about two things. One is getting the slides, which I think we'll coordinate with our marketing team and make sure everybody gets the slides. I don't know if folks know how to get access to, are they going to get an email? Do they follow up with an email as far as getting access to the system and then getting the run through from you? And I know John said you'll coordinate that, maybe have a cohort group once a week or twice a week to get through.
Yep, they'll be receiving an email by the end of today from the list that I get from our host here.
Yeah, awesome.
We'll set up from there.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I know we've got 30 seconds, so thank you everyone for attending. I know everyone's got hard stops, and we appreciate the partnerships here, and we will be following up, as Rick mentioned, also with the thank you email, and we look forward to engaging you in the future.
I love John Cook even put an alarm up that says, hey, it's time to wrap it up.
My next call.
All right. Thanks, guys. Keep in touch. Good
right.
seeing you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.